So he walked up the street with his wife, Lisa, who then walked across the road to another cafe where the girls were sitting, and Andrew and I met on the street. And we both looked at each other and big hug and all of that. And I said, oh, my God, after 37 years, that was the longest 15 minutes of my life.
From one of Mamamia's half a dozen homemade, slightly shambolic podcast studios dotted around the country, I'm Mia Friedman, and this is a special episode of the No Filter podcast. When a woman finds out that she's unexpectedly, accidentally, inadvertently pregnant, she's usually standing in a bathroom somewhere, looking at two lines on a stick. But that's not really where she's standing, because no matter how old she is, no matter what her social or financial situation is, she's actually standing at a crossroads in her life. Will she become a mother or not? That's the question Anne Stevens was faced with 38 years ago. And the decision she made would change the lives of more than a dozen people, many of whom hadn't even been born yet. This episode of No Filter is actually one we've wanted to bring to you for quite a while now because Anne Stevens is a member of the Mamamia extended family. Her twin daughters, Jessie and Clare Stevens, work here with us. Clare's the editor, Jessie's a podcast host and the assistant head of content. And the story of their mother and the decision that she made all those years ago is one we've followed closely over the past few months. And finally, Anne is ready to tell it. Anne, tell me about finding out you were pregnant. Do you remember that day?
I do, but in all the time that's passed, I don't remember that as a really significant moment. I think I found out and then I just sat with it for a really long time.
Where were you at in your life on that day?
I was studying to be a teacher and I was in a relationship with someone.
Had you been dating for long?
Yes, we'd been dating, I would say, for a year or two on and off. He wasn't the most stable partner to have. And I think there was probably, he wasn't monogamous, put it that way.
Because I was going to say often when a woman gets pregnant unexpectedly, there's no matter what she decides to do next, there's a moment, and I speak from experience, where you think, could I imagine being with this person as the father of my child long term?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I sat with those thoughts for a really long time. And that was a discussion that we had, obviously, that if I was to go ahead with this pregnancy and have this child, that we could not, we weren't going to be together. We had decided that we weren't going to be together. We certainly weren't going to get married.
Mm.
And so we decided, that our relationship would end.
How was it when you told him? Were you nervous about telling him?
I don't, that's not even a significant thing in my memory. I think telling mum and dad, that was a significant thing. But telling him, I think I knew also that he had plans to go overseas and that those plans were, set in cement. So he was going. So basically I was just telling him something that really, in my mind, was my decision, my choice.
So what year was it and how old were you?
It was 1982 and I was 22.
Living at home?
Yeah, living at home with mum and dad at that stage.
And how did they react to the news?
They were pretty good. Mum was good, but she was angry. She was almost like, how do you get yourself into a situation like this? And what do you think you're going to do? Do you think it's just something that you can just do, have a child, put the child up for adoption and move on with your life? Do you really think it's that simple? So she was very challenging of my ideas and really wanted me to make sure that I had thought things through.
So you presented it to them with the decision that you'd already made, which is to go through with the pregnancy and adopt the child out?
Yes, I did. And I waited, I think they were out and then they came home and I told mum. And I did say to mum, is there any way that we can not tell dad? Can I just disappear for a little while? And I had a place where like a flat that I could go to and whatever with a friend. And she was like, no.
Why didn't you want to tell your dad?
Why no girl wants to tell their dad?
Yeah, fair enough.
You don't want that look of disappointment on their face. And my dad was not a judgmental man at all. I just knew that he would be scared. It would hurt him. And he'd be scared because he never wanted to see any of his kids hurting.
How long between finding out that you were pregnant and making the decision that you were going to go through with it and adopt? Because you had 3 options. You could have terminated, had the baby and kept it, and adoption. How did you make that decision?
Look, I think I sat with it for a really long time, and so the decision of termination was really taken out of the equation.
How pregnant were you by then?
Well, I would have said about 4 months.
Oh, wow. So you only found out when you were 4 months?
Oh, no, I found out earlier, but I didn't really talk to anybody about it for quite some time, except the father. And we sort of carried on like we were in Gaga land for a little while. Yeah, I think probably, maybe 16 weeks or something like that was when I really faced up to it.
And why did you decide not to keep the baby?
I have just then had a very strong belief that this child needed everything he could possibly have. And that to me was 2 loving parents, 2 parents who really wanted a child and couldn't have one. And that stability. There was a stigma. There was a stigma for me as a single mum, but there was also a stigma for a child that was brought up by just their mum. And that was real.
It's hard to imagine now, isn't it? But in the right up until the 80s and perhaps beyond, and some would say still today, there is a stigma about single mums.
Absolutely. And I think when I look back on it, 1982 was different, very different from 1972. Like I was able in 1982 to take time off uni and get some financial support from the government. I was able to go on like a sickness benefit, which meant that I could sort of go into isolation, if you like, and then come out and resume my life.
Why did you feel the need or the desire to do that? Is that something that your parents were worried about what people would think? Was that something that you just felt inside yourself?
It was inside myself. My parents didn't, make me feel ashamed or anything. It was just something, I had this feeling that went through me all the time. I didn't want to be pub gossip.
So where did you go? What did you do for 5 months? You just disappeared.
I stayed home for a bit of it, and then, ironically, the father went overseas and I moved into his unit. So I was living with a friend of his and we got along very well, and it's very similar to now. I would just go for walks. I would talk to people on the phone. I would read.
Where did you tell people that you were?
People at uni thought I was sick. They thought that I had some sort of like a anemia thing and I just needed to take the semester off.
So you went and had doctor's appointments. Did you go to birth classes?
No, I didn't. And I was thinking about that the other day. I went to a public clinic, but I had my own doctor, which was interesting. So Mum would come to the appointments with me and he was fantastic. All the doctors and nurses were brilliant. I did not for 1 minute feel like I was treated any differently to any other woman.
Did you have to sort of keep coming out in the sense of, oh, how exciting, you excited? And did you have to keep telling every sort of health professional, oh, no, but I'm giving the baby up for adoption, or they just knew before they met you because it was on your files? I
think it was in the notes.
Yeah, right.
I think it was there because the doctor that I had, he never went there. He didn't. He just treated it as any other pregnancy, and none of the nurses ever. In fact, I probably got better treatment in hospital in terms of I remember a nurse coming and sitting with me the night before the delivery, just chatting.
A lot of the popular culture that we see now shows the adoption process in movies and TV shows as the kind of young single mother meeting with prospective parents. But that's about open adoptions. It wasn't like that in the 80s, was it? How did you actually go about putting your child up for adoption while you were pregnant? What did you do?
I think I must have contacted an agency directly, but I don't remember having any human contact with them until after he was born. and they came in to the hospital and they sat with me and they asked some questions and took some notes. And the notes were very unusual, and I've been lucky enough to see them through meeting up with Andrew, and they're very not judgmental, but they ask some really unusual questions because they're trying to match the child with a family that would be similar.
Oh.
So they're trying to match you both culturally, education, religion, all of that. So they ask you really weird things about the level of education that your brothers have reached. And they're trying to match the child with the right family.
So you had no say as to where he went?
No, not at all. And I wasn't asked anything like that. It was just, this is the only thing I was asked was, would you like continued contact? And there was sort of a stipulation, like when we agreed that I would not contact him, that he would contact me if he wanted to after he was 18.
Did you have to agree to that?
No, they were things, there's all sorts of options. I thought that was the easiest. I didn't want his adoptive family, I didn't want them thinking about me. I didn't want them to every 6 months have to send me a photo or drop me a line. I just thought, raise him, get on with it, don't worry about me. And then I didn't want him thinking that one day I'd knock on the door. So I wanted that clear. Live your life, and then let's see when you turn 18 how you feel.
What do you remember of giving birth?
I remember being very, very scared the night before. I remember being overdue, so I was in hospital and then induced the next day. The birth was, they gave me an epidural. So some of those movies that you see where they make a woman go through pain because she's being punished, that doesn't happen. They were extremely caring. I'm sure when they had the little briefing in the morning, they knew that this person was a young, unmarried woman and she was going to not be keeping this child. So I got, very special care.
So people were very compassionate. You felt cared for and that there was compassion shown to you.
Definitely. Yeah, I think I had an epidural. The labour was, 5-6 hours long, something like that. And then there was a complication at the end, which was pretty revolting, which was a placenta. The afterbirth wouldn't come away, the placenta. Oh. I didn't deliver the placenta, so that had to be removed manually.
Oh.
No one needs to Google that.
Was anyone with you?
My mum. My mum was with me, which is interesting because a woman who'd had 7 children, she'd never seen a birth.
Not from that angle.
Not from that angle, which she made jokes about throughout. And she also made a joke afterwards that someone said, "Oh, so have you seen much of Anne?" And she said, "No, I haven't seen much of Anne lately." And then she said to me, "I've seen more of you than I ever want to see again."
Were there any protocols that were followed that, like, you weren't allowed to see the baby or hold the baby? What happened when he came out?
I don't know if these things were intentional or whether they just happened to me, but I remember I was put in a ward where there were no babies. So I was put in like a gynecological ward. Mm-hmm. There was, one other woman in there. I don't remember talking to her much or whatever. I had lots of visitors. I was allowed to go to the nursery whenever I wanted, but it wasn't encouraged. They were careful with that. They said, whatever feels right for you. I remember they gave me something to dry up milk. So he was being bottle fed down in the nursery, but I could go and hold him, and members of my family could as well.
When he came out, did they give him to you to hold?
I don't have a memory of that. No. I think because of the complication, they were dealing with me as a medical
emergency
case emergency at that point. And so he was taken away and looked after elsewhere.
You've gone on to have 4 more children. How do you compare those few days in hospital with no baby in your arms, not feeding?
I don't know, because as I had prepared myself fairly well mentally, I think, that this was what was going to happen. And I was really recovering after this pregnancy. I had to have a blood transfusion and all of that. So I was basically recovering. Yeah, and as I say, a few visitors, and that's when the adoption agency came in and chatted with me and things like that too. So
did you feel sad?
I felt scared. I felt scared that I was making a decision which I was going to regret. And if I regretted it, say 6 months down the track, what the hell was I going to do?
Oh, yeah. Do you think that there was second thoughts, or it was just more the permanence of this decision, the irrevocability of it?
Yeah, I think it was, your mind just goes everywhere. So, and the agency people were very clear, there was a bit of a cooling off period, but it wasn't very long. And I didn't change my mind during that cooling off period. I knew what I wanted to do, but I was scared about how I was going to feel down the track. Was this going to be something that ruined my life? Like a death of a child that was just always with me. But luckily, that was not what happened.
Did anyone try to talk you out of it?
No. And I think I had a little bit of control over that too, because I had decided what I was going to do. I was offered, my eldest brother and his wife said, if you would like to keep the child, you can come and live with us. They had young children at the time. We'll work out some childcare, whatever. We want you to finish your teaching qualification. So that was offered to me in a letter, and I still have that letter. So that was pretty special.
Were you tempted?
No, because I wasn't thinking about me. I was still thinking that life's hard, and it's going to be, and if you can make life easier for somebody by giving them what I thought was important, love and stability and a mum and a dad, that's what was more important.
What memories were you allowed to have of him? Were you allowed to have a lock of hair or a photo or the hospital blanket? Was there anything that you had that you could keep when you left the hospital?
Yeah, so I had a photo. They did your normal, those funny blue or pink blankets that they do in the crib. I had that photo. A little way down the track, I received another photo and a little note from Andrew's mum, and that's, put away somewhere special.
Do you remember the last time you saw him before you left the hospital?
Yes, I remember sitting in the nursery, holding him, and then I remember putting him back in the crib, and then I went upstairs and I got ready and left the hospital.
Did you cry?
I don't remember crying, but coincidentally there was a very good friend, a male friend who used to come and visit me in hospital. He was a friend of the dad's, and I've made contact with him recently, and he gave me the impression in the email that he actually came to the hospital and picked me up and took me home. And he said that I nearly crushed his hand holding it as we walked out of the hospital.
When was the next time you saw Andrew?
Well, the next time I saw him was on Facebook.
Of course.
So that's when I saw a photo. That was the first time I saw a photo of him. Then we started communicating with each other, and the next time I actually saw him move was when he sent me his wedding video.
Whoa, so how many years between those two things?
Only 37.
Oh. And what were those years like for you?
Very busy, very, very busy raising a family, working, and yeah, I was content. In my head, I felt that I had done the right thing.
I won't presume to know what it's like and the times that are the most difficult, but I imagine his birthday was probably a day that you remembered every year, is it?
Well, that's an interesting thing because for the next couple of years, my mother gave me flowers on the 2nd of July each year.
Mm.
And I've told people that and they think Mum was being a bit mean. But
why? I think that's a lovely thing to do.
Well, probably because I wasn't showing a lot of emotion. So Mum was sort of, poking the bears, so to speak. But I don't think she was. I think she was acknowledging something as a woman to a woman, saying that even though you don't have him with you, it happened. And
did you tell people that you had a son, that you were a mum?
No. So the people who knew when I was pregnant, which was a lot of my family and 2 girlfriends, one in Sydney and one in America, no, it did not become part of my story that I told people in subsequent relationships or friendships or whatever.
What about when you met your husband?
Yes. Once I knew that we were serious, I told him. It didn't really, I don't even remember his reaction. It was sort of natural. It was just a natural conversation talking about each other's past.
When you had the girls, did it make you think about Andrew in a different way or miss him more? How old would he have been by then?
I remember going into a bit of a panic the night before the girls were born. I was in hospital and I was going to be induced with twins. Like, who gets induced with twins? Only me. But I do remember a lot of memories coming back that night and I was really scared and the nurse couldn't understand why because she thought this was my first delivery. And so I remember later on that evening another nurse coming to speak to me and I said I had been through a delivery before and I was really scared. She was great. She talked me through it and said, look, we know and it's in your notes and there's nothing for you to worry about. And yeah. But I don't remember thinking about Andrew, in an emotional way of these replacing him or at last I will have babies I can keep or those sort of things. I wasn't thinking along those lines at all.
And so over the years, did you think about, will he reach out, wonder where he is, I wonder if he's safe? When were the times that you would think about him most?
I thought about him a lot during his adolescent years because I thought this is the time when somebody is trying to work out who the hell they are. And if there's a piece of the puzzle that's missing, this DNA, this part of his identity, I was hoping that he wasn't trying to, because, all kids go through who am I and all of that, and they think that finding the piece to the puzzle is going to make them happy and content and whatever. So when we got through those adolescent years, I thought, I think he's okay.
Why did you think that? Okay. Why did you think that?
Because he was obviously, well, to me, he had got through those years without feeling that something was missing, that he was who he was. Because
he hadn't contacted you. I mean, it's every adolescent's dream that they're adopted and their real parents aren't their real parents. It's like a fantasy at that time. Maybe I'm adopted. My real mum wouldn't be this much of a cow.
Exactly, and I'm sure, he couldn't hide from that though because he was brought up knowing that he was adopted. But I hoped that he would be content, and then I thought maybe he will come looking when he wants to start his own family, and that to me made logical, rational sense because you know how logical and rational these things are.
Oh, so logical and rational. But I would have thought that you would have been, I would have been counting down till his 18th birthday thinking incorrectly, of course, that'll be the first thing he does. The day he turns 18, he'll come looking for me when he can. But you already knew that probably wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, and for some reason I also thought it would take an enormous amount of courage to do that. And when I was 18, I didn't have the courage to do anything. So I wasn't sitting waiting thinking I'll be disappointed if he doesn't. I was just thinking he will do this when he's ready.
Did you have a picture of him in your mind at all those different ages, or was he forever sort of frozen in time as a baby in a little blankie?
Yeah, frozen in time for sure. And I had no idea. And that's what was interesting when the reconnection happened, that, Clare found him on Facebook in about 3.5 seconds flat. And then we all looked and went, oh my goodness, he looks like my side of the family or whatever. Yeah.
How did he first reach out to you? How did he make contact?
The way it happened to me was that I received a letter in the mail from the Salvation Army, and it was their arm of reconnecting families. And they said, we think we have someone who might be looking for you.
Anne, tell me what that was like.
It was a moment where you had to remind yourself to breathe.
Yeah.
I had just gone, and Pete was like, so what's this? And I said, well, I don't think it's lost superannuation. I think maybe there's someone looking for me. So, and we knowingly looked at each other, and then the next day I contacted them, and within 24 hours we were emailing each other.
Who emailed first?
He sent me a letter that he had already prepared that was going to be sent to my home address. But once we swapped email addresses, he sent me that letter via email.
I don't want to pry, but what did it say?
It was incredibly measured. It was, when I read it aloud to Pete, I said, either he is a lawyer or he has had advice and support, like he's had advice on what to write, because it was so considerate.
In what way?
In that I have been looking for you, and I've had a long time to process this, and I understand this might be coming as a shock to you. I don't know who you've told about me. I don't want to intrude. I will never just knock on your door. I know that you may have your own family, and if you would like to connect, I would like that.
Oh, wow. So very considerate.
Extremely considerate.
Yeah.
I would have said, emotionally intelligent.
And how did you reply?
An email, definitely, long. I just said that I would love to have contact, and I would love him to ask as many questions as he wanted, and we would just see where this went.
What was the first thing that you wanted to know? Did you have 100 questions?
I wanted to know that he was happy and healthy, and that came very early on, when you know that somebody has moved to the other side of the world, had a fantastic education, has met a wonderful woman and is really happy, and is probably thinking about starting a family, and, has his own home, has a great relationship with his mum and dad and his siblings. It's like, what more? There could be nothing more that you would want.
Was that a massive sigh of relief for you?
Massive sigh of relief. And it was like everything that you'd hoped for, that it just, you received a big hug from yourself for making that decision, and it all turning out okay. Of course your mind plays tricks and you think, he's tricking me, and we're going to start communicating, and then he's going to say, why did you do this? Like your mind plays terrible
because it
tricks.
seemed too good to be true.
Too good to be true.
Because he didn't have resentment and he wasn't angry or bitter.
That's right. He wasn't. He kept using, terms like being already complete, and that this was just, this was all added extra, and just, his curiosity and whatever was being, satisfied, I suppose.
Did you feel like you had to not justify your decision, but explain your decision, why you'd given him up?
I did that anyway. I don't know that I felt I needed to. It's very interesting, the generations now, they don't know anything about adoption. This current generation, they don't know about adoption.
Because it's almost extinct.
It is. And so it's not a question that he asked immediately, like, why didn't you terminate? But it was obviously something that he was curious about. And that was what was so amazing too, is that in the initial letters was basically a huge thank you.
Yeah,
that was what I was getting. I was getting a thank you for my life, which is pretty amazing.
What about his dad? Did you tell him?
Well, that was interesting because Andrew had felt a little bit guilty about not really being that interested in his dad, which we've talked about since. Socially that is just, anyway. But when he found out that his father had contacted me in recent years to make sure that my details were up to date with the agency, because he said to me, if someone came looking for us, I would like it to be as easy for him as possible.
Oh, wow. So he'd obviously, it had stayed on his mind too all these years.
Absolutely. So when Andrew heard that changed his view completely. He was like, so this person actually didn't just do a runner. He actually thought about this and cared enough about me to want to make this process really easy. So I have friends of friends who still know him. So I was able to get a phone number and email address for him really quickly.
Oh, wow.
And I sent that to Andrew and they started communicating.
You lived in different countries on other sides of the world, and even though back then borders were still open, you weren't able to just hop on a plane immediately. You had a job, you have family here, he had a job over there. How long was it between making contact and being able to see each other physically?
It was only just over a year.
That sounds like a long time. I suppose after 37 years it's not a long time, but or was it actually a good thing that over that year you could get to know each other slowly?
Yes, I think any sooner would have been pushing it.
Did your kids grow up knowing about him?
No, they didn't. The girls found something years ago in a file, and I walked into a room.
It was a birth certificate, wasn't it?
Yeah. Or adoption papers. They very quickly shoved it back into a manila folder and I just looked at them. But I didn't think they were ready to understand or talk about it. So I waited and sort of pretended as though that hadn't happened. So I waited and then eventually we talked about it. My boys have only known in the last few years, and I don't know what messages I was getting, but I was getting very clear messages. You need to tell them before anything happens, before a reconnection happens.
Do you mean messages internally, like you had a strong sense that we need to get this out in the open so they don't hear about it from the wrong people?
I don't know. I didn't want to be telling them something because I had to. Because I imagined them saying, why didn't you tell us before? Did you think we couldn't handle it? Did you think that we didn't love you enough to understand that we weren't going to judge or whatever?
So did you sit everyone down?
No, I did it really weirdly. There were text messages and phone calls and all sorts of weird things. But the way my kids operate is that they all talk about me behind my back anyway. Mm-hmm. So all I needed to do was put something out there and then they would talk it through with each other and support each other and ask lots of questions and be honest with each other about me behind my back.
When you raise a child that's biologically yours, you don't even notice similarities in how you look or mannerisms or the sound of voice because you're in it so much. What's it like to meet someone or hear their voice when they're an adult? that is you're so close to you? Do you recognise things about them? Is it weird?
You definitely. What's unusual about this is that he has an American accent.
Oh, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, so that's unusual, but there's mannerisms, there's still intonation, there's a laugh, there's he did something when we met, and Claire, Jess and I just looked at each other and went, oh my God. And it was my eldest brother, John.
Before you left to go overseas to meet him for the first time last year, I spoke to you to say good luck, and you said, I'm so nervous. I feel like I don't deserve this happy ending. What did you mean by that?
I have felt like that a lot, that I made a decision a long time ago and I had to live with that decision. And so any of this good stuff that's happened now, I'm really grateful for it. And I just feel as though, I don't know, some days I just feel as though I don't deserve it.
Do you still feel guilty?
I don't feel guilty. And now I'm reassured that I had no need to feel guilty, because he did go to a loving family who have given him everything that he could possibly have asked for, and he's taken advantage of it. He will tell you he has taken advantage of being adopted in terms of how he thinks and what motivates him to do his best and to be the best person he can be, because his life was such a gift.
The day you met him, how do you get ready to meet your son that you haven't seen for 37 years? What do you wear? How do you, what goes through your head that day?
I know, it was very strange. It was a very strange thing, and we planned a lot of via email. We'd planned a few things, and we were going to meet at a cafe. The cafe was really busy and there was a big line out the street. So lucky we were texting each other and stuff. So he walked up the street with his wife, Lisa, who then walked across the road to another cafe where the girls were sitting, and Andrew and I met on the street. And we both looked at each other and big hug and all of that. And I said, oh, my God, after 37 years, that was the longest 15 minutes of my life, standing here in the street waiting. And then we sort of just went on as though we were old friends and chatted about Trump and Boston. And, we just chatted and we sat down and we had something to eat. That night we went to dinner, had a lovely time, did some sightseeing. Very unusual.
Oh, there is no rule book apparently.
No?
Were you emotional? Were you in shock, do you think?
I felt like an observer of the whole thing. I felt, I think we caught sight of, looking at each other when conversation was going on. I know we were sussing each other out and looking for things, but I did feel like an observer.
It's been, about 6 months since you first met? How have things developed since then?
Well, he's been to Australia, and so he's now met my boys. He's met my husband. We had a little bit of time together when he was here. We had some time in Narooma before the bushfires hit, and the day before he left was a very emotional day.
How do you feel towards Andrew now?
He is extraordinary. He is so socially intelligent and so caring. And apart from all of that, he's also a lot of fun. And he's a big talker and he loves jokes. And when we met, we were in the car one day and I said to the girls, close your eyes, who can you hear? And we were like, Jerry Seinfeld. He's got that kind of accent, but he's also, he's extraordinary.
And you're going to become a grandmother.
And yes, this was pretty amazing because we've had a lot of laughs about this, that he has met the family, he's checked out the DNA, and he's still decided to go ahead. So good on him.
There's another side to this story, of course. It's the story of Andrew, the baby that Anne gave up for adoption in a Sydney hospital back in the 80s. So what was his life like? And what made him decide to come looking for her? You'll find out in the second instalment of this beautiful story later in the week when we drop part 2, Andrew's story. And here at No Filter, we're all about bringing you these types of beautiful stories. If you look in your feed, there are hundreds to help you get through the day in these crazy times. And if this episode has brought up anything for you or you need some help at the moment, please call Lifeline on 13 11 14. Take care, stay safe, keep your distance, and lots of love.